You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And, of course, we're your hosts for the show. I mean, that should be obvious by now, but here we are. So, of course, we talked a little bit. I don't know when was it that we brought up Tales of the Empire? It was at the tail end. No pun. Was it the last episode? Oh yeah, maybe it was. Yep, you're right. It was the last episode toward the end. We talked about how the trailer just seemed to drop out of nowhere, and we thought it would be a good idea to maybe come up with some predictions and talk about what we thought of it. Thought about reacting to the trailer, but the only problem is every single time we do that, we get like a copyright thing. So I thought, I would just give us a little bit of a break. The trailer's been out. I'm sure people have seen it. If you haven't, then go on YouTube. It'll be there. Maybe after the fact, I'll put a link to it in the description so you guys can check it out if you're watching the rebroadcast and you haven't already seen the thing. But I remember we were talking about, because the last time that we heard anything about this, it was Star Wars Celebration Europe, I think it was. And I think it was last year, right? That last year? It was either last year or it was the year before, but I think it was last year. And it was billed as Tales of the Jedi Season 2. Because I remember you and I were talking about it. It's like, oh yeah, we're really looking forward to it or whatever. And then, all of a sudden, this trailer drops, and essentially what they've done is instead of calling it Tales of the Jedi Season 2, they've rebranded it Tales of the Empire, and now we're going to see a little bit of the flip side of this thing. So, I don't know. Why don't you take us through some of what we saw in that trailer?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think one to kind of kick this off. I mean, I wonder if they're going to actually keep flip-flopping between like seasons.
Yeah, so like season 3 is Tales of the Jedi again?
The Jedi again, yeah. And then it goes back to the Empire, which I wouldn't mind, actually, if they did it that way. But yeah, Tales of the... And I like the way that it was revealed, because it kind of showed the Tales of the Jedi logo, and then it shifted to Tales of the Empire. And what we're seeing two... Once again, like, we're following the storylines of two characters, and I want to make sure I get this. Oops, sorry about that. I want to make sure I get this person right, but it's basically the magistrate from we originally saw her in The Mandalorian.
Yes.
Yep. When she
Morgan Elsbeth. Yes.
Morgan Elsbeth, that's what her name is.
Yep.
Yeah. So Morgan Elsbeth we're following the story of her, and we kind of see her talking to Thrawn, and Thrawn is basically asking her, like, why do you want to join the Empire? And so she's recanting the reason why her choice is to join the Empire. And that's because her planet was basically like ravaged and destroyed, and so she almost kind of has nothing else to lose, and she wants revenge, it seems like. So Thrawn accepts her request, and she eventually joins the Empire. And then her story is also connected with another person that we've seen in the past, Barriss Offee, who is the Padawan of Luminary Unduli. And she's her story has been explored a lot in the Clone Wars animated series. There was kind of a story arc where she kind of formed a relationship with Ahsoka. Barriss, I'm talking about. She formed a relationship with Ahsoka, and eventually she framed Ahsoka for a bombing that took place, and so which caused Ahsoka to eventually get expelled from the Jedi Order. And then when her name was cleared, Ahsoka even was just like, you know what? Screw it. I think I'm going to just stay gone. And so that's what caused Ahsoka to essentially leave the Jedi Order. Excuse me. So there's a lot going on here. And I'm interested to see how these two stories are intertwined. There's a lot of stuff we see. Barriss Offee essentially becoming an agent of evil, so to speak, as she's being recruited to become an inquisitor and to actually hunt down the remaining Jedi. Which that part is very interesting to me because if I'm not mistaken, she died during the Order 66 purge.
Well,
So I'm wondering.
yeah.
I'm kind of wondering: are they Is that not canon? Are they kind of or are they going to say like she survived, or instead of killing her, they actually captured her, and maybe this is where her new station is? I don't know. I guess we have to wait and see on the show. But I was wondering about that. Um, but yeah, this looks really interesting. We're actually going to get a peek into some of the Inquisitor training, which is right on the heels of the Acolyte coming out this summer. I'm really primed to see that because, like I've always said, we see so much of the Jedi training, but we don't see a whole lot of the dark side training and things of that nature. So that looks really interesting. That's just to kind of kick us off so far.
Well, and again, I mean, I don't know. I think she's locked up because who was the other one? Was it Luminari or Luminara something? There was one of
Yeah,
the other
Luminar and
ones that
Dooley.
looks
That's her master. Yeah.
Yeah, and they sort of look similar because of the same, makeup design or whatever, and
the tattoos
and the tattoos and stuff like that. So I think she might have been the one that was killed in Order 66. I don't think that Barriss was killed because she was basically in prison. But then again, admittedly, it's been a minute since I've seen, the Clone Wars. I guess it would be season 7. But what I find interesting too is the fact that, toward the end of that trailer, obviously, when they say, oh, now you're gonna have a new master or something, right? And it's Vader. It's ironic because, when they're all kind of like bowing and Barriss is looking, I almost wonder if she knows that that's Anakin. Because what's really interesting is the fact that Anakin was the one that arrested her and put her in jail in the first place.
Exactly.
So I mean, at first it's kind of like that happens, and now she has to serve him, and it would be really fascinating to me because this is going to be one of the first times that we've seen the direct aftermath. I mean, I guess you can count Anakin in that too, but where you see a fallen Jedi now turn to the dark side, and they're going through their training and they're pretty much turned. Usually when we see it, like in the case of a Count Dooku or something like that, they've already turned and they've been turned for a while.
Well, what's really interesting, to your point, Eric, is that what I'm wondering is that, like, does Anakin realize that that's Barriss? And now, because of what she did, how does he feel towards her? Because on one hand, well, I mean, because on one hand, it's like he still has a soft spot for Ahsoka.
Right.
And it's like, but of course, in another life, he probably would hate her. And now does he still hate her for that? Or does he kind of like, all right, well, all is forgiven, because we're on this, what I mean? It's kind of a weird,
I don't know, man. He killed a bunch of younglings. And I get it. He did hate what he was becoming, but yet he knew in order to achieve what he needed to achieve for the greater good, it was sort of like, okay, I have to do this, although this kind of sucks. I get that part of it. And then, of course, by the time this happens, which is another good point, actually, I don't remember in the trailer if they really illustrated the exact time period that this takes place. I mean, obviously it's in between 3 and 4. I get that. But I mean, how far in, right?
Right.
Is it like, 3 months, 2 years, 10 years? Because that would actually make a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like Barriss she seems a little older, but not that much.
Right.
So I'm guessing maybe a year or two, honestly, after. I would probably surmise, because now you got to think about it like, okay, Vader has to have gotten a little bit more comfortable in his suit. So I don't think it was like, just months after. I think it's maybe like a year or so after now. And it's funny because the Sith had the whole rule of two, and they're basically like, and I often wondered about the Inquisitors because to what degree of force or what level of force powers do the Inquisitors possess? And what I mean by that is like, okay, when we last left Barris, she's essentially a Jedi Padawan still.
Mm-hmm.
So it's reasonable to assume that she's still almost at Padawan level, maybe getting closer to Knight. But now you're training her in the dark side. So it's like, okay, are most of the Inquisitors, would they be considered more or less Padawan level, or are some of them Knight level? Or because you always have to run the risk of like, what if one of them gets powerful enough to become almost a master level, which essentially would become a Sith Lord?
Well, and then the other thing you got to look at too, right, is that there's a rule of two if you're a Sith, but it's like, how do you get around that? It's like, she's technically not a Sith, so we're still good. I mean, that's where it does get ridiculous, right? Because like you said, and I'm trying to think, as far as dark side mastery, that's probably where, because when you are a Sith Lord, now you're using Sith magic. There is like an element of the dark side that is unique to the Sith. That's well established in canon. I mean, that's both in Lucas's canon, EU canon, which you have to use that term loosely, and Disney canon. They all seem to pretty much agree with that assessment, right? That the Sith are sort of their own like subsection of the dark side, if you want to call it that. It's not, in other words, it's not just a linear power level. Like, okay, you go from like Acolyte to Inquisitor to Sith to, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really more like, because if you look at it, the Night Sisters are probably about as powerful, and in some ways more so than a lot of the Sith, but they're using the dark side in different ways. And so you have like kind of an equal power level, but you have different slants on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it still seems to me like Sith Lords are a little bit more. I mean, like you said, I think there's more. I think it seems like the Sith are actually Force users, where the Dark Sisters are dark magic users, and
Sure.
it's very similar to the Force. And I think the magic can influence the Force, if you will. Like in the case of we see Savage Opress, he was kind of a weakling, and then the Night Sisters imbued him with a bunch of dark side magic, and he basically became almost like a Force user. But I don't think he was still more powerful than, let's say, a Maul.
Well, I mean, that's tough to say because the Night Sisters had a lot to do with Maul too.
True.
So
true.
It's. I mean, what's funny is the Night Sisters.
But then Palpatine did as well, though, and that's the other part.
Yeah,
of it.
and that's true. And I mean, he did strike a deal with them. And again, the Night Sisters being the Dathomir witches from the expanded universe. I mean, that's pretty much where that comes from. They pretty much directly lifted that, and more or less made them interchangeable in that sense. But what's interesting to me is that and this was something that I, ever since the whole Inquisitor thing came to be, it's like you said, I mean, where do you draw the line? Because if you have a bunch of them and now you're creating what in essence is an army of Force users, and again, what strengthens your point actually is when Asajj Ventress got too powerful, that was when Palpatine was like, all right, she's got to go.
Right? Exactly. That's what I'm saying, and that's where that's my whole thing, because you could almost consider Asajj basically an Inquisitor, But
well, and the other thing is,
but Maul. I mean, not Maul, but Dooku kept calling her his apprentice.
Yeah, I know.
So it's kind of That's what I'm
It's
saying. Like the dark side stuff is very convoluted, where at least the Jedi stuff is very kind of like linear. Like you go from being a youngling, then you're a Padawan, then you are, a knight, and then you get the rank of master. Unfortunately for Anakin, and then then grandmaster, and then and then there it is. So it's a very linear format, and it's kind of, and once again, I think it's also knowledge and skill driven. With Inquisitors, or the dark side, you really don't know what the rubric is to be anything. Because, like you said, you have Dathomir witches, then you have um, the Inquisitors, you have acolytes,
well,
and
but
then
you
you
got to
have
look at it
Sith
like
Lords.
this. You got to look at it like this, though. What you were talking about was strictly within the Jedi Knights or the Jedi, right?
Hmm.
Youngling,
Right.
Padawan, Knight, Master, Grandmaster, and so on.
Sure.
There
Yep.
are other Force users that are light side Force users. And that's what you would compare, like the Night Sisters versus the Sith, let's say. They're two different. I mean, even though it's true,
Yeah,
the whole
like a
magic thing,
Bendu or
but
something.
yeah, right, something like that. Although they're kind of gray, but they use both too. I mean, there are other factions, but if you're, what's really strange though is the fact that, and again, I'm hoping that the acolyte actually shines a light on this whole thing, right? Because the idea was a Sith acolyte is kind of like a Jedi Padawan. That was the idea. And that's
Hmm.
probably still the case. So, you go from Padawan to Knight to Master, and you basically probably go from like acolyte to, I don't know if you go directly into Sith Lord from that, or how that works. I'm sure we're going to get a little bit of a window into that now, because they do seem to be focusing quite a bit now on, hey, let's shine the light over here on the dark side, right? Let's
Yeah.
let's actually develop that a little bit more and maybe keep it a little bit less shrouded in mystery, and explain some of it, which,
Yeah. Well, I think it's necessary because it won't, because once again, when you're using certain terminology, it gives context to other things. So when you say like, okay, your new master, and then you got Vader walking in, well, master of what? Like, are you just saying master as in the sense of supervisor? Are you saying master in the sense of he's going to teach you more dark side things, or he's just going to explain how the Jedi? You know what I mean? Like, to what level are we talking about when you say master? Because normally when you hear that term, it's like, okay, well, I'm your master because it's expected, especially when it comes to the Sith, that you're going to advance to another level. Well, what's the next level then? You
well,
see what I'm saying? Because
sure. But I mean, here's what you got to look at too. And it brings up a good point, because it's like we said before, right? Asajj Ventress was Dooku's apprentice. She got a little
right.
bit too powerful for Palpatine's liking, so it's like, okay, she's got to go, wipe her out, kill her, whatever.
Hmm.
But at the same time, same breath, same time period, pretty much. Well, I mean, Asajj was a little bit into the Clone Wars too. But the other problem is that, like you said, you have these Inquisitors who possess the Force, obviously. To what degree,
Right.
we really don't know. And they're Vader's Inquisitors. A lot of people were trying to retrofit Starkiller and make him an Inquisitor. And so you got to wonder, like you're saying, okay, well, what's the Inquisitor? Like, what makes you an Inquisitor versus, whatever else? And why is Palpatine okay with having this army of dark side Force users? There's got to be a cap on their power at some point.
That's my point. Yeah,
Like
because it's
even if you have like 20 of them, it's not going to be of a consequence.
well, yeah, and that's my whole point. Is there's got to be some sort of cap because one, Palpatine only like okay, one they have the rule of two, so you have Palpatine as the master, Vader as the apprentice, and then now you have a bunch of these Inquisitors running around. who are probably advanced Padawans. They're probably like
So maybe you go
Obi-Wan was.
acolyte and then inquisitor.
Yeah, possibly, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know the hierarchy, but I'm just saying, like, as far as power skill level, I'm assuming that an Inquisitor is probably around the skill set of Obi-Wan in episode 1 when he fought Maul. I'm assuming that's roughly around the power spectrum. Because like I said, and that's the thing with the dark side, the more hatred you have, the more anger you have, the more powerful you become. So if you, and it's like, okay, well, is it once again an M count thing? Because now we have to like, okay, well, you have a you only have a 16-ounce cup that you can fill of midichlorians versus a Sith Lord who's got a 64-ounce cup. You know what I mean? So it's like, is it that where like, okay, I know you can't go any higher than this, even
Well,
at your zenith,
the
you're
midi
not going to go
chlorians.
beyond.
Well, if you're looking at the midi chlorians, it's still going to influence how much force power you're going to have, whether it's light or dark. It doesn't matter.
Right.
The idea behind the dark side is it's just quicker and easier because it's using emotions versus, controlling them and everything else, right? I mean, and just having blind hatred and anger and all that, because one of the things, if you look at the way, admittedly, we haven't had a whole lot of, training scenes with Palpatine or anything like that, but the few things that we have had, whether they be in the original trilogy or in some of the novels that we've read, you do see that what it comes down to is the refinement of that. It's like, it's not just, oh, the more hatred I have, the more powerful I am. It's
the Incredible Hulk or something.
Right. It's more of a refinement. What you're doing is you're channeling that hate and that anger into the Force and amplifying the Force. Ergo, that's what makes the dark side, honestly, is that you're using these emotions to, in essence, artificially enhance and amplify your Force power. And that's why a lot of those powers, I think, tend to be more aggressive and offensive, like lightning and choking and so on and so forth. Before we get too much in the weeds on this, we got some chats. Ted Adam Green basically, well, I got this like a little out of order. He's thinking maybe Tales of the Bounty Hunter for season 3. And he's digging the name change and the focus for this season a lot. And yeah, I mean, I agree. And that's actually one of the things that we were talking about early on in the show today, is the fact that it was really a stroke of genius. Instead of getting more, stories with the Jedi or whatever, hey, let's shine a lens on what's going on with the Empire. Because we haven't even gotten to like Grievous and some of these other things, which of course I'm assuming is a flashback scene. And that was one of the other things too. When you look at Grievous in this, he actually looks like threatening and menacing in this, like way more than what we got in Revenge of the Sith. I mean, it's like if Grievous had looked like that in Revenge of the Sith, it would have been like, all right. I mean, sure, he was in there all of like maybe 2 seconds or something, but it was nice to see that. And then, of course, Walker's joining us again tonight, saying Happy Monday. Happy Monday, Walker. It's good to see you. So, yeah, I mean, when you look at these things in totality, it's really going to be interesting, and I hope they focus on that. And a lot of the trailer, admittedly, did focus on Barriss and the training. The Grand Inquisitor, was nice to see him again. It's almost like a Clone Wars reunion with all these characters, honestly. Because a lot of them have come back, and I think that you're right. I think that the fact that they're taking Morgan Elsbeth and they're intertwining her story with Barriss, which was really bizarre, because I remember watching this trailer going, well, that's kind of an odd combination of people to focus on in this, but it does make sense.
And it also kind of furthers the story because, we know that when we saw Mandalorian, and when Ahsoka popped up and she's, battling Morgan, that's what we learned about Thrawn to begin with, right?
Right. Yep.
And so then also we get the um because in the Ahsoka series, that's Morgan as well.
Yep.
So now it's kind of like, all right, we're getting the bits and pieces that allow those two to kind of connect, and we'll be getting some information because maybe we might find out more about Gideon, or there's might be some other little nuggets that we might glean from that as we approach the next either season or movie now with Grogu and Din. So that's really cool.
Yeah, this
And
is essentially the prequel.
yeah, exactly. Essentially, it's a prequel, and I don't know how many stories this is going to be. As
Yeah, I don't
far
know if
as
they actually. I know they're all dropping at once. I think it's like
yeah,
6. If I'm not mistaken, it's 5 or 6. Some reason I want to say 6 because I looked online and I saw the release thing to where they're actually dropping them all at
6
once.
episodes.
Yep.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's going to
On
be
May the
interesting
4th.
too. Yes, on May the 4th, they're going to drop all 6 episodes of this thing, and naturally, obviously, we're going to handle it one at a time. When we do the review, but I think that what's really going to be fascinating about this is, like you said, they're going to focus a little bit on how Thrawn and Morgan met, and maybe a little bit of where that hit. Because remember, when Ahsoka first appeared in The Mandalorian in that episode, and she battled Morgan, we were all like, "Well, who's this?" I mean, I remember thinking to
Mhm.
myself, like, "Man, is this an expanded universe?" Like, I almost felt like I should have known who she was. Because she's battling her,
Yeah.
and she like he knows her, and all this, and they both know Thrawn, and I'm like, wait, am I missing something? Should I really be freaking out right now because this character is being featured in live action?
Right. Well, and she had like that whole Beskar staff and everything
Yeah,
like that. That whole
that's what I'm
Beskar
saying.
spear. Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like, so there's a lot of uh of story and meat on the bone to try to dissect with Morgan. Like I said, and as well with Barris, because we're seeing different training elements with Barris. We're seeing her
Mm-hmm.
go up against Grievous. We're seeing her in that little like that ray shielded thing when she was like, your final test is to do this, and we're seeing all the different because at first I thought she was Seventh Sister. I
Yeah.
was like, no, that's not her. I was like, well, maybe it is. I don't know, but I looked it up and they were like, no, it's not. It's not her. So I'm like, okay, well, why don't we see Barris? Or why haven't we seen her? Is she just
Well, the
on
idea
other
was she was
missions, or
locked
did she
up.
not actually make it?
No,
Well, no,
she
I'm just
was.
saying, like, as far as the Inquisitor program, like, okay, did she
Oh, you
make
mean
it?
before
Like,
now?
yeah, exactly. Like, did she? Because now we know that she was trained to be an Inquisitor. We haven't seen her.
Oh yeah.
You think like they would have shown her go after Kanan and Ezra, and you know what I mean?
And Obi-Wan.
So the fact that and Obi-Wan, and the fact that we haven't seen her is kind of like, okay, did she not pass, or maybe she just off somewhere else doing other missions or whatnot. So that's what I'm saying. This makes all this very interesting, and like I have to keep going back to trying to figure out the hierarchy on the dark side of
Well,
things.
you have to, because if for no other reason, then you basically have a former Jedi who is now becoming, because let's face it, that's what most of the Inquisitors are. They're Jedi that have just gone dark, basically. But and Barris, like you said, what I like about this is that she's a familiar character, but she's not like super powerful. It's not like Shakti had she survived. It's
Right.
like, because that would be a little too like, well, whoa. I mean, you can't really have her just being an inquisitor, right?
Yeah,
So,
you have a lot of explaining to do for that one.
yeah, you definitely have to do that. Walker Chatson says, I have a bad feeling Barris doesn't survive Vader.
Yeah, I got
Ahsoka
that
barely
feeling
did.
too.
And
Right.
we all know what happened to was it third sister, the Moses Ingram's
Seventh
character?
sister.
Seventh sister.
Oh, no, Moses is
She's third sister, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking you're talking about the other one that was chasing Ahsoka. That was seventh sister.
You know, I mean, she almost didn't. I mean, there's like, it almost seems like if you're around Vader, if you're too high up in the military, like you're that admiral level, your life is pretty much constantly in danger. And it also seems like if you're a little too high up in the Inquisitor chain or you're noticed, your life's probably in danger. And again, it does make me wonder if they're going to, because Anakin is the one that put her in jail, arrested her basically. So I wonder now, you know, first of all, it's going to be, well, how's she going to feel? Well, actually, before any of that, it's, does she even know that it's Anakin? That's number one.
Right.
Once they get past that, if she does know it's Anakin, how is she going to feel serving under him when he's the reason why she was in prison? Because going back to an earlier point that you made about when we were talking about how much time maybe passed, one of the things that made me think that it's not just a month or two, it might be a couple of years, maybe as many as 3, is because it's implied in the trailer that she's been locked up for a while. And it was kind of cool, you know, when they said, was it the clones basically, when they're kind of like, you know, at least you're not a good thing you're not a Jedi anymore.
Not a Jedi anymore. Yeah.
You know, and it just seemed like the Empire was really fleshed out by that point. You know, it's almost like we're in the Bad Batch era in that sense. Where, and I'm talking like further in, like season 3, right? Because season 1 obviously took place like right when Order 66 hit. So I'm thinking, and I'm trying to think too, it looked like there were still enough clones around that it seemed like it was still early enough, right? Like the whole Stormtrooper program hadn't quite hit yet. So I'm thinking we're probably talking maybe around the same time period as into season 1, maybe early season 2 of the Bad Batch.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be hard to say. And I think, you know, the more, once we get into these episodes, hopefully some things might be revealed where we can kind of glean a little bit more information as far as where in the timeline, because they might be talking about or show us different events. It's like, oh, okay, that's where we are.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, and that's what I mean. Like, so with the Inquisitors, like, I know because Palpatine was looking for Force sensitive kids. And so that was part of the Inquisitor thing too, because I think he either wanted them to make them Inquisitors or he wanted them dead, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And if they had and I think it was like if they had too high of an M count, it was like, okay, yeah, you got to kill them because they run the risk of either being a Jedi and getting in my way, or they run the risk of like, okay, if I make them, I mean, if they become too powerful, you know, then now they can, on the dark side of things, you know, now, I mean, granted, I don't think you're going to find anybody higher than Vader, even with him missing limbs and stuff. Like it's just because it's Vader. But, and then he's like, right, you know, Vader is pretty high. So then, you know, only thing higher than him is Palpatine. And I don't think anyone's going to be close to that. So,
yeah. And I mean, honestly, the two of them could pretty much take out just about any, even if they're large in numbers. And the comics have proven that. Let me get to these chats really quick. Walker says, either Barris senses Anakin with Vader or Vader tells her who he is right before he offs her. I guess that gives new meaning to Barris Offie, right? He goes on to say, yeah, maybe a year and a half, 2 years have passed. I mean, I think that's probably a safe bet. I don't think, because of the high clone presence, I don't think too much time has passed. But because it seems like the clones are still fully rooted into the Empire, right? Like feels like the switch is a little bit fresh. On the other hand, you know, I don't think we're talking like a month or two either. So, yeah. But no, that's a good point. I mean, I don't know. It's really interesting to see how they deal with it because, like you said, with Tales of the Jedi, they focused on, you know, the different characters, but then they had that one Dooku story that they kept coming in and they started filling in blanks. say between like Attack of the Clones or Phantom Menace, stuff like that. You had that whole Yaddle thing. So they really enriched the prequels that way. And it makes me wonder, are they going to do the same thing with this? Right?
Yeah, see, the thing is, unlike season 1, we got Tales of the Jedi. The first episode was essentially about Ahsoka as an infant.
Mm-hmm.
And she gets snatched by that weird saber-tooth tiger looking thing.
Yep.
Whatever. And it's like, okay, that became the story. And then when we got to Dooku, we saw two sides of things, sort of. We saw mainly just he and Mace Windu working together, being like almost like a good cop and bad cop type thing, which would be funny actually. They actually made that into like a series.
It'd be like the
Dooku.
Lethal Weapon of
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking too. Like
Dooku is Riggs and Mace is Murtaugh.
Murtaugh. Yeah, Murtaugh's Riggs. but yeah, but then we also got like this whole cool thing with Yaddle though, and Mace was kind of intertwined into that, but it was more so about like Yaddle discovering that Dooku was, Darth Tyrannus. And I think that with this episode, well, not this episode, but this season of Tales of the Empire, I think they're trying to merge more of these two stories together. Like they're more intertwined.
Oh, without question.
As opposed to, how, okay, we got this little Ahsoka thing and then
right.
now we're really focusing on, what I mean? I think it's more so like they're really converging and making a larger story.
Well, in that sense, I think it's a weird comparison, but I think it's going to be a lot like Obi-Wan that way. Because if you think about it, it's the third sister and Obi-Wan. Those were the two main storylines that they were running. And they were intertwined. But I think that what's happening is, because if you look at the Morgan Elsbeth story arc, and then you look at Barasafi is a good character to maybe, look through her eyes and basically see the building of the Inquisitors, how they handle new Inquisitors, basically flesh out that storyline a little bit more. And then you had the Morgan Elsbeth one, which, as we said, is very much acting as a prequel to what's essentially the Ahsoka series, but it actually began in The Mandalorian when Ahsoka confronted Morgan and was talking about Thrawn. And you basically have that whole aspect of the story, and it's pretty much how they're going to converge the two. So on one hand, it's acting as a prequel, and this is something that I have been saying for a while now, and I'm glad that I'm able to say this, is there really, I think, everybody duck, but I'm actually going to compliment Disney here, or Lucasfilm at least, is that they're really doing a good job now of establishing these different things and really fleshing out the connective tissue between all these different, characters, story arcs, things that they've established. They're really doing a good job in filling in a lot of these gaps. And they're doing it through the books. They're doing it through these animated shows, the live action shows. I'm guessing eventually the films, I think that that's like a really cool thing that they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least on the, like I said, for the animated side of things, I mean, they really don't miss much. I mean, and when I say miss, I mean like the animated shows are usually pretty good.
Yeah, overall.
Clone Wars was good. Overall, that's what I'm saying. Overall, like you got Clone Wars, phenomenal. Rebels, phenomenal. Then you had Tales of the Jedi, which was phenomenal because we got a lot of backstory and a lot of nuggets out of that. And then now we have, like I said, another episode. I mean, Vision's excluded, of course, but now we have.
Hey, season 2 wasn't bad.
I mean, I'm just saying it doesn't.
I know
give
it's
you,
not well, but But
It's
if
not
you
part of
think about
canon.
it,
You know,
it's not. It's not, and that's the thing. You can't really count that because that's more of a
right
kind of like outside the
avant-garde type
realm, like
thing.
like a what if kind of deal or something, just like a
But that's what I mean. And so, like, when we look at, now with Tales of the Empire, it's like, okay, once again, just the trailer alone, the story is compelling
yeah. It's
because if
actually
you
one of the
already
few things.
know,
It just
yeah,
that whole trailer, man. It's only a couple of minutes long, and it just sucked me right in to where I'm
yeah, I'm
like, yes,
excited.
I'm excited. I'm
I'm,
on board for this thing. You know,
yeah, I want May to get here,
yeah.
just so I can see this thing. And it's cool because like I don't have to wait a whole bunch. Like the Bad Batch has been knocking it out the park. That's another great animated series we will always often talk about. And we're still reviewing.
Mm-hmm.
So and like I said, even this season 3, man. I mean, it just
Oh,
every episode has
it's
been a hit.
probably, and that's the thing. Season 3 of the Bad Batch has probably been the single greatest season of Star Wars, like probably ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like really difficult to. I mean, when you really stop and think about it, because the Mandalorian's really good, Andor was really good.
Mm-hmm.
The other shows had their moments, but it's like you said, it's incredible. And again, it's filling in this world. And in fact, what it's doing and what I have a feeling Tales of the Empire is doing, and even some of the novels, they're really doing a nice job of making you really care about this golden era of Star Wars, which is in between episodes 3 and 4. And again, most of what we've gotten, your Rogue One, your Solo, all the stuff, even Obi-Wan to a degree, all that stuff, Rebels, it's happened later, right? It's closer to episode 4. What I like
Mm-hmm.
about the shows that are coming out now, like the Bad Batch, this one, they're actually closer to episode 3 because I've often said, even before all this stuff happened, it's like, to me, that's the most interesting time. I think the two most fascinating time periods in Star Wars is right after episode 3, how the Republic switches to the Empire and a lot of the stuff like that. And then immediately
Mm-hmm.
after episode 6, once the Empire
Yeah.
falls, what happens? And that's basically the 2 points of concentration that they're doing right now. So I think that that's just a fantastic thing.
Yeah, man. I think there's a lot of space for transition, and that's what you need. When you have the end of Revenge of the Sith, now you're really trying to establish the empire. Like, I mean, it's had its inaugural moment, like, okay, but it's like, all right, now we need to really firmly root and establish the empire to be what it is in episode 4. And there's a lot of time that goes in between that's in between that. Same goes for the sequel versus the end of the original trilogy. You got 30 years in between the end of Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. Well, that's a whole lot of time that you have to set up the First Order if you really want to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I think
yeah, I
that's
mean,
where they're going, by the way. I think that
yeah, I
what
mean,
they're
those are
doing is
great
they're
sandboxes to
backtracking
play in.
here. Yeah. But I mean, I think that, a Project Necromancer and all that other stuff. And I mean, I think that they're using in between episodes 3 and 4 to lay the groundwork for what eventually happens in between 6 and 7.
Yeah, and maybe that hopefully gives the sequel trilogy a little bit more credence and a little bit more um I don't want to say, like, I guess the word would be value. Like, it gives it more value. Um
Oh,
so
I
yeah, I
agree.
mean, and that's why I say I think, with projects, and then of course, going even back beforehand, we know what now we're having the with Acolyte taking place 100 years before, or two, is it 100 or 200 before the events of the Phantom Menace. That's another, once again, you have a lot of space to set up things to, now it's like, okay, it gives the prequels now more credence, more weight to it because you saw what came before it.
Well, and
So
not to mention the fact that it's going to be the first High Republic era show that we're going to see.
yeah, absolutely.
And we
Absolutely.
we already know we're going to see at least one character that's, one of the High Republic characters. Walker basically says exactly, especially because episode 3 and 4, and then between episode 6 and 7 spans decades in between. Plenty of stories to flesh out for at least 2 more. He says generations. Yeah, it just cut off. Yeah, well, I mean, because you're talking 19 years between episodes 3 and 4, and between 6 and 7, you're talking like 30. So you have a lot of time on the 6 and 7 side, but you even have a comfortable amount of time. I mean, look, there's almost, you might as well just say like 20 years between episodes 3 and 4. And like I said, most of the stuff has actually swung on the, onto the whole like closer to episode 4 thing. And then Walker, I like it too, even with the emojis. Plenty of money-making opportunities for Disney Lucasfilm.
Only if they do it right.
Exactly. Only if they do it right. That's the big key. Because right now, the fan base is so fragile because they've made so many critical errors that, a lot of people, like, there's a lot of really cool things going on right now, but a lot of Star Wars fans are unaware of it because the goodwill's gone.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, if they would just do it, if they would just do it for the story, do it for the art. That's why Lucas, I mean, sure, people had issues with the prequels too, but none of it was a money grab with him. He was spending his own money, first of all. So, and he wasn't looking to make money on these things. They just did. They made money because they were timeless and they spoke to multiple generations and they were very well done. That's why they made money. It's almost like when you're a YouTuber, right? They always tell you, be a YouTuber because you really love being on YouTube and talking about whatever your niche is. Don't do it because you're trying to make money doing it. Because that's like the wrong motivation. If you do it right, the money will come. Now, of course, we're still waiting. I mean, we're doing it for the love of this, believe me, because we're not really making a whole lot of money. I mean, even though, yes, we do have David as a member. We would love it if more people did the whole buy me a coffee thing and at least gave us tips or something. But so we're doing it for the love of it. But that's what you have to do. If you're going to make these movies, if Disney really wanted to do it, just the IP is already there and it's already established. All you got to do is not mess it up. I mean, if you just don't even shoot for being good, just shoot for not screwing it up. If you just do that, you'll make the money. And then if you even take it one little step further and you actually make good stories with, good direction, the execution's on point, the writing's good, and you put out stuff that lives up to what Lucas had done, then you really make a lot of money. The money is there itself. It doesn't necessarily have to be the motivator. And yes, there's so many opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, the groundwork's already been laid. I mean, for years, for eons. That's why Star Wars has been able to stand for so long. It's a blueprint, and the work has already been done for you. It's just continuing. Now I sound like Kylo Ren, but it's like, continue what he already started.
Yeah, I'm going to finish what you started.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's just where it is. But like I said, I think so far, I'm and it's been a while to say that I'm truly excited. And I can say that I'm fully excited, not just like, okay, I'm curious. Like, no, I'm really actually excited for what Tales of the Empire is going to bring, because it just looks like it. And then once again, it's and it just occurred to me. But once again, these are 2 female leads. You got Barris Offee and you got Morgan Elsbeth. And once again, they're strong characters, but they've already earned our um, support and belief in them without having to deal with the pandering.
Yeah, that's a
It's
good point,
it's
actually, because I sense zero wokeness in any of this. Like, no
exactly that's
agendas,
what I'm saying.
no, none of
Yeah.
that, And you're right. You're absolutely right,
That's because it's Filoni, and
Right.
that's my point, and that's the difference between you have Filoni, i.e., a male who's actually projecting women in a strong way that's not, some woke agenda, as opposed to a woman trying to do it, and it's littered with propaganda and agenda. And that's all we've been saying is that, we just want good timeless stories, good stories that we can, and it's things are earned, it's believable, it's and it makes sense, and that's what we want out of our Star Wars.
Yeah. And exactly. And it's not too much to ask, really. And I mean, I think that, like you said, it feels good to be truly excited about it again. I mean, I'm into now book 2 of the Thrawn Ascendancy. I had started it. I didn't get as far as what I thought, but I'm like 200 or 300 pages in. I mean, it's like a 1,000-page book or whatever. It's tough to say with the whole ebook thing, right? Because a lot of it depends on the device you're reading it on, font sizes, like, what theme you got on it. But needless to say, I'm fully into it, and it's just incredible. And I've often said, why can't they have, on the television or film side, why can't they be as incredible as the books? And they're starting to actually do that. And it really feels good to be excited about new Star Wars related content coming out. It's kind of cool, actually. But here's the thing. So, we're all looking forward to it. And of course, when it comes out on May the 4th, we'll start reviewing it. Whichever show day is the closest to when it's released. First one after. It'll probably be like Friday. Because that tends to be when we do our review shows now. But what's cool is we can review that episode by episode. And right now we got a poll up on our channel. So just go, to the community tab and answer the poll. It's basically asking what you guys thought of the trailer. Let's see. Walker's got another one. He says, I saw a few fan complaints that Tales of the Empire is focused on 2 female characters, and I'm like, so what? We're going to see Thrawn, Vader, Grand Inquisitor. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, he goes on to say that, some people just enjoy whining and complaining. And that's it. But I think, though, in their defense, when you had Rey that was so obviously overpowered, and you have Kathleen Kennedy, who is obviously, with their force is female and trying to make this, like, they're basically trying to cram this social agenda into Star Wars, and they have been doing it. I think what's happened is it's created a certain sensitivity to a lot of fans. Now, people like Daryl and I could look at everything on its own merit, right? We don't make assumptions about anything. We look at it and go, okay, this is obviously, they're trying to cram an agenda into this, but over here, they're not, But I think that what's basically happening is because Kennedy did that, it's just created this hypersensitivity to the point that now fans are almost looking for it, And I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's the case. And, Walker says, yeah, Kennedy shouldn't have done that. No. And that's the consequence, unfortunately. But what I'm thinking that's probably going to happen, though, is as time goes on, and if they have enough shows, movies, whatever, where they're not doing that, right? Where they are honoring Lucas's Star Wars, and they're just making a timeless, good project. No agendas, are just timeless. Like Once Upon a Time, right? I mean, being timeless, you can have that stuff in there because then it's no longer timeless. So if you tell timeless, good stories, I think people will slowly come back. It just depends on what they do. But that said, take our poll. Of course, if you haven't already hit the like button, we'd appreciate it if you hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Friday, we're going to be reviewing the next episode. What are we on? Episode 12, I think, of the Bad Batch?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. So you guys aren't going to want to miss that. Let's get this last one in from Walker Says, I love how Filoni and Favreau have done a great job in highlighting strong female characters, but it feels generic, not forced. And that's it. Yeah. That's what generic Lucas did.
And authentic. Yeah.
And authentic. Yeah. And that's the thing. That's what Lucas did. I mean, if you go back and look at all the female characters that have been in Star Wars, there's a lot of them. I mean, when you factor in everything from the Clone Wars to the original trilogy, you know, I'm talking about still Lucas, right? The prequels. I mean, there's just a gang of them. All of them individual. None of them are like cookie cutter, you know, characters or anything like that. They're all very strong. They're all very capable. I mean, it's astounding how many. Mm-hmm. Even my new characters. You look at like Aura Singh. You look at, I mean, you could go on and on and on. There are so many characters that it actually made what Kathleen did completely unnecessary. It's like, learn your own stupid IP. You know, it's like, you obviously don't even really know Star Wars if you think you got to generate all this stuff. You know, we'll see on the Acolyte. The Acolyte might be, I mean, again, I could see that going either way. Because I know Leslie Headland, on one hand, she's very much a social justice warrior and is in that mindset. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, she's also a huge Star Wars fan. So, and I didn't really detect it overtly from the trailer. I mean, I could see where it could go that way, but I don't know. And then he basically says, like in the Mandalorian season 2 finale, yep, even Princess Leia was shockingly different for the time. Yeah, exactly. The original trilogy was released. She was the first one, you know, and then it goes on from there. So there's just like a lot there, right? And he says, but, you know, people love Leia regardless, compared to the dislike for Rey that still exists, because Rey's not a realistic character. You know, I mean, Leia was strong, but she was grounded. She was realistic. You know, Rey really wasn't even all that multi-dimensional.
Well, you had with Leia, you had depth, you had character. I mean, you saw her be strong, but you also saw her be caring, compassionate, sensitive. You saw her, you know, I mean, there's like her attitude when she was on the Death Star from when Luke walked up to her, like, aren't you short for a stormtrooper? And, you know, like, you came in this thing? Or you're braver than I thought. You know, like, you see that.
Don't forget the big one. Get this big walking carpet out of my way. That's like the best line.
Yeah, of course. You know, but then in Empire, you know, you see a lot of her softer side. You know, you saw how tender even what she was with her own brother, which is gross, but you know, but then you also saw her with Han, you know, just moments with her, you know, when she dropped her guard, you kind of felt her drop her guard. And then of course you saw the whole moment when she's like, I love you. And Han's like, I know, you know, that whole line. And then you see her in Return of the Jedi where she's strong, she's fighting on Jabba's palace on the barge in a whole bikini. But then, like, at the same time, like, okay, you see that tender moment she has with Luke and Han on that bridge, you know, on Endor. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you see so many different sides and versions of Leia. You saw her be, you know, how she was even with Ewoks, like the little teddy bears. Like, she was kind of cool to them and, you know, very nurturing and kind and all that. And those are the things that really made Leia so popular, was because you saw the multitude of facets that she owned. And like you said, Eric, she's grounded and it's real. Whereas Rey is just kind of like, oh, look, I can just do this out of nowhere. Like no training, no. I sent you a meme earlier about like, how the villain would train for like their whole life to be something.
Yep.
And like the hero's got like 2 months in, or in Ray's case, like 30 seconds of training, and all of a sudden she's blowing up stuff. She's
Oh, look, I can, I try a couple of times and now I can use the Jedi mind trick all of a sudden. Like without
right,
even like I just like, like just
pulling
push real
lightsabers out of
hard,
the
like
snow
I'm like I'm trying to
going
push
half a
one out
football
after
field.
being constipated or something. I mean, it's just like, I mean, it's just so stupid and unrealistic. Every single time, it just takes you out of the story. It's just a poorly written character. She had been a guy. If it had been R-A-Y instead of R-E-Y, it would have been the same thing. All right,
Yeah,
Peter Griffin
absolutely.
joins us. He says, I want Vader to kill Barris after he thinks Ahsoka is dead. Little payback for both. That would be actually kind of interesting. And we had speculated earlier, honestly, that maybe Barris doesn't make it off, right? Because she's not one of the people that they're sending after Obi-Wan that we know of. They can always say, well, we just didn't send her to Tatooine. We sent her to, whatever. So we'll have to see. I mean, there's going to be 6 episodes of this thing. They're all going to drop at once, although we'll review them one at a time. And of course, a lot of that depends, too, because if they actually do a thing to where they're bundling, because you do bring up a good point, this has a different feel than Season 1, right, than Tales of the Jedi. It might actually be better to say, do like, if there's like a 2-episode arc or something, maybe review both of them at the same time or something. I mean, they're only going to be like probably, 10 or 15 minutes tops.
Yeah, right.
Peter Griffin goes on to say, Kylo trained since he was 3 with Luke, and Rey holds her own the first time touching a saber. It's the only thing that I will a little bit defend. Because a lot of people complained about that with Finn. Everybody forgets that Kylo was just shot in the side with a bowcaster. The fact that Kylo could even stand after that is a testament to Kylo's power. He was actually trying to control that and fight, so he was incredibly weak.
Well,
that said, though,
that's true. Even Snoke even had to bring it up. That's the hilarious part about it. Snoke even brought it up. He was like, you got bested by a chick who barely had a lightsaber. That's one of my favorite lines, man. I love that. I was just like, thank you.
That's true.
It's like somebody. It's like the writers even knew, like, yeah, this is stupid. Let's just make fun of it.
Yeah, that was. I mean, there's a lot of really bad things, and they almost had to make her a Palpatine just to kind of explain it. But even then, I mean, if I were Michael Jordan's kid, it doesn't automatically mean I could play basketball like him. I would still have to be trained by him or somebody, right? It just means I'd have the natural affinity, probably.
Yeah. And even his own kids, I mean, that's why they didn't do it, because it's too much pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But yeah.
It's like, I mean, you're not going to live up to that. Let's see. Yeah, Peter says, Snoke's got some stand-up comedian chops. Well, yeah, and he also had that whole Hugh Hefner thing going, too. He had his little, robe thing, and,
I just love the fact that when she tried to bring the lightsaber to her, he flew it around her and slapped her upside the head.
Oh, that was the best. That's true.
Man, I was dying laughing.
Yeah, that's a good point. That was actually pretty funny. Because that took a while, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. All right, guys. So with that, make sure you take the poll. I want to see where you guys, what your overall thoughts were on this whole trailer that we saw. If you want to leave a comment, man, my light went out again. If you want to leave a comment and let us know.
The eclipse.
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. Actually, 2 lights went out. I was about to say, because I'm like, that's pretty dark all of a sudden. Dark side, dark side of the Force over here. But yeah, let us know what you guys think of the trailer. Let us know how excited you are, what you're looking forward to, what you think is going to happen. Join us Friday, because Friday we're going to be reviewing I think we're on episode 12 of The Bad Batch, so you're not going to want to miss that. And I'll get this last one in from Walker. Says, fun chat as usual. See you guys on Friday. Yeah, I hope so. Because we love it when you guys chat in. And I'm sure with this next episode of The Bad Batch, we're going to have a lot to talk about. So until then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.